Hello, and welcome to another episode of Artificial Fluency. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Emma. Great to be with you all today.
Today we're tackling a topic that so many of our listeners have asked about: how to speak English fluently. Not just correctly, but with that natural flow that makes conversation feel effortless.
Exactly. John, we all know that feeling when you know the grammar and vocabulary but somehow still can't seem to get the words out smoothly. It's frustrating, right?
Absolutely. I remember my own experience learning Spanish. I could ace a written test but then completely freeze up when ordering at a restaurant. So today, we want to share some practical strategies that actually work.
And the best part is, these aren't just our opinions. These are methods backed by research and language learning that have helped thousands of English learners break through those fluency barriers.
So grab a notebook if you can, because we're going to cover a lot of useful techniques today. Ready, Emma?
Let's dive in.
Before we get into specific strategies, let's talk about what fluency actually means, because I think there's a big misconception out there.
There definitely is. A lot of people think fluency means speaking perfectly without any mistakes like a native speaker. But that's not realistic or even necessary.
Right? Fluency isn't about perfection. It's about being able to communicate smoothly and effectively, even with some errors along the way.
Exactly. Think about it, even native speakers make grammar mistakes, search for words, and use fillers like, and you know.
Oh, what does fluency actually look like in measurable terms? Recent research from Oxford University suggests a few benchmarks: speaking at around 130 to 160 words per minute, which is a natural conversational pace, using relatively few filler words, and being able to recover quickly when you make a mistake.
And perhaps most importantly, fluency means your brain isn't working overtime to construct every single sentence. There's a certain automaticity that develops.
That's the key difference between knowledge and performance that trips up so many learners. You might know English perfectly on paper, but speaking is a performance skill that needs different types of practice.
It's like knowing all the rules of basketball versus actually being able to play well in a game. Two very different things.
Great analogy. So now that we understand what fluency really means, let's talk about what gets in the way. What are the main obstacles that prevent English learners from speaking smoothly?
From our experience and the research, there are 4 main obstacles that typically hold people back.
The first one is what researchers call excessive monitoring. Basically, you're checking your grammar too much while speaking.
Oh, I see this all the time with my students. They're trying to apply every grammar rule they've ever learned while speaking, and it just slows everything down to a crawl.
Exactly. It's like trying to drive while constantly checking the driver's manual. You can't do both at the same time effectively.
So what's the solution for this one, John?
Time-constrained practice. There's a great technique called the 4-3-2 exercise. You explain the same topic 3 times, first with 4 minutes, then 3 minutes, then only 2 minutes. This forces your brain to focus on communication rather than perfect grammar.
That's the key difference between knowledge and performance that trips up so many learners. You might know English perfectly on paper, but speaking is a performance skill that needs different types of practice.
I love that exercise. It really works because you simply don't have time to overthink.
The second major obstacle is what we call retrieval inefficiency. Basically, you know the words, but you can't access them quickly enough during conversation.
This is that frustrating feeling of the word being on the tip of your tongue, right?
Exactly. And it happens because vocabulary items aren't strongly connected in your brain. The solution isn't more vocabulary lists, it's strengthening the connections between words you already know.
Like creating topic-based word clusters instead of random word lists.
Precisely. For example, if you're learning restaurant vocabulary, don't just memorize isolated words. Practice them in logical groups, types of food, cooking methods, ways to describe flavor, and activate them daily through speaking practice.
The third obstacle is about working memory limitations, isn't it?
Yes, basically, our brains can only juggle so many things at once. When you're speaking a foreign language, holding a complete sentence structure in your head while also thinking about vocabulary, pronunciation, and your actual message can overload your working memory.
And that's why many learners end up speaking in very short, simple sentences even when they know more complex grammar.
Exactly. The solution here is chunking learning common phrase patterns as single units rather than building every sentence from scratch.
Like how native speakers use phrases like, "the thing is," "as far as I'm concerned," or, "if you ask me," without thinking about the grammar inside them.
Precisely. If you master about 25 high-frequency sentence frames and practice filling them with different content, your speaking will become much more fluid.
The fourth obstacle is pronunciation processing delay. when your mouth just can't keep up with your brain because certain sound combinations are challenging.
Yes, every language has unique sound patterns. And when your mouth isn't used to making certain transitions between sounds, it creates a bottleneck in your speech. Targeted practice with the specific sound combinations that trip you up. For most English learners, there are about 15 to 20 sound transitions that cause the most trouble, and focusing practice on just those can make a huge difference.
Those are great insights. John, so we've identified the obstacles. Now let's talk about the most effective ways to practice.
Default text.
Not all practice methods are created equal when it comes to developing fluency. Some give you much more bang for your buck than others.
Right, and since most of our listeners have limited time to practice, we want to focus on the highest yield activities.
At the top of our hierarchy is a technique called shadowing. This is where you listen to native English audio and repeat it in real time, trying to match the speed, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible.
Shadowing is amazing because it bypasses your internal grammar monitor and trains your brain and mouth to work together at native-like speeds. Even 15 to 30 minutes a day can transform your fluency within weeks.
Another high-impact exercise is what we call monologue expansion. You start with a simple statement like "I went to the store yesterday," and then you keep adding details, one sentence at a time.
So you might add, "I needed to buy some groceries. Then I was planning to make pasta for dinner," and so on.
Exactly. This trains your brain to develop ideas in English in real time, which is crucial for natural conversation. Aim for about 20 expansions a day on different topics.
The third top-tier exercise is question-response drills, where you practice answering common questions as quickly as possible.
Right? The goal is to reduce your response time to under 3 seconds for frequently asked questions, like "What do you do?" or "Where are you from?" These come up so often in conversation that having fluid, automatic responses makes a huge difference in your perceived fluency.
Those are great core exercises. What about supplementary activities?
The next tier includes practices like lexical substitution, taking a sentence and practicing variations by swapping out different words. For example, "I'm thinking about visiting Paris next summer" becomes "I'm considering exploring Tokyo next winter."
And don't forget about functional phrase mastery, learning the specific language for different situations like apologizing, making requests, or giving opinions.
Right. The third tier, which is still useful but less directly impactful on fluency, includes extensive listening, analyzing recordings of your own speaking, and read-aloud practice.
So if someone has limited time, they should focus mostly on the top-tier activities?
So what's the solution here? Exactly. Aim to spend about 60% of your practice time on those high-impact exercises, 30% on the second tier, and 10% on the maintenance activities. Even 40 minutes a day with this ratio will produce noticeable results.
Let's talk about how to put this all together into a practical plan.
We've found that an 8-week structured approach works well for most learners. The first 2 weeks are all about assessment and setup.
Right, you need to know your starting point. Record yourself speaking for 3 minutes on any topic, then count your words per minute, how often you pause, and how long it takes you to recover from mistakes.
This gives you baseline metrics to track your progress. You'll also want to create a personalized vocabulary list, focusing on words you actually use in your field or interests.
And select about 12 sentence patterns to master. These are structures you'll practice until they become automatic.
Weeks 3 and 4 are about building your foundation. You'll do 20 minutes of shadowing daily with content that gradually increases in speed.
Plus 15 minutes of pattern practice with those sentence frames, and 5 minutes recording and analyzing your own speech.
By the end of week 4, most learners see about a 15% increase in their speaking speed, which is quite noticeable.
Weeks 5 through 8 are when you really accelerate. You'll add impromptu speaking practice, talking without preparation about random topics for short periods.
And response time drills where you practice answering common questions as quickly as possible. By week 8, many learners reduce their pause frequency by about 30%.
After the 8-week intensive period, you can move to more advanced practice like context switching, moving between different topics quickly, and register flexibility, which is adjusting your language for formal versus casual situations.
But the core practices of shadowing, pattern practice, and expansion exercises should remain part of your routine for ongoing improvement.
There are some great digital tools that can support your fluency development. One we often recommend is Prat. It's free software that analyzes your speech patterns.
Apps like SpeechLink let you record yourself shadowing native speakers and get feedback on your pronunciation.
And Elsa is great for targeted pronunciation work, especially for sounds that don't exist in your native language.
Don't forget about good old Anki for spaced repetition practice with vocabulary and phrases.
But remember, technology gives you metrics and structure, but you still need real human interaction to develop true conversational fluency.
Speaking of challenges, let's address a couple of common problems our listeners might be facing.
One issue we hear a lot is, I understand everything but just freeze when it's my turn to speak.
This is typically a retrieval pathway problem. Your brain knows the information but can't access it quickly enough under pressure.
The solution is forced output exercises, giving yourself very short preparation time before speaking. Start with 30 seconds of preparation, then gradually reduce to 0.
Just 4 minutes of this kind of practice daily can rewire those pathways surprisingly quickly.
Another common problem is, my vocabulary feels too limited to express myself well.
This is usually not about knowing too few words, but about not having enough practice with the most useful ones. Focus on really mastering the 2,000 most frequent English words plus about 500 terms, specific to your field or interests.
And practice retrieving them, not just recognizing them. Say them out loud, use them in sentences, and activate them regularly.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to emphasize 3 simple commitments that can transform your English fluency.
First, measure your current speaking rate and pause frequency so you have a baseline.
Second, schedule specific practice blocks totaling at least 40 minutes daily. Consistency matters more than length.
And third, start with shadowing. It's the single most effective technique for developing the physical and mental pathways for fluent speech.
Remember that fluency development isn't linear. You'll experience plateaus followed by sudden improvements. Trust the process and keep practicing consistently.
Exactly. Focus on progress, not perfection. Every day you practice brings you closer to your fluency goals.
In our next episode, we'll talk about how to adapt your English for different professional contexts. Stay tuned for that.
Thank you for listening to Artificial Fluency. We'd love to hear about your fluency journey. Drop us a message on our website or social media.
Until next time, happy practicing.